last week we had a discussion in which it was kind of pretty clearly the case that people are not willing to back Starmer. So what about a new party of the left? Can we sort that out? Can we get a mass membership party? I thought a good person to start the discussion would be George Galloway, who's been part of alternative parties to the left since he was kicked out of the Labour Party with the Iraq War. So I had an interview with him a couple of days ago, and I've had lots of people saying, how dare you interview George Galloway? I'm interviewing George Galloway specifically on the issue of what can we do to build a mass membership of the left, if it is possible. I think it's important that we hear from people who've been around and can give us some insight into that. So we're going to play the interview now, and it's about 15 minutes, the interview. And then after that, we're going to speak to a number of people, including Chris Williamson, Alan Story of Get PR Done, Deepa Driver, Richard Brenner of the Socialist Labour Network, Tosh McDonald's on the call. We've got lots of people to speak, but we'll start off with George Galloway. And if you don't like George Galloway, at least try and listen to what he's saying on this issue. There's lots of people who say, well, you've got to stay in Labour because there's no alternative. We can't, that will never build an alternative left-wing party to Labour, a mass membership party to Labour. We can't do that. It's impossible. There's a lot of negativity around that. But looking at your record, you've done very well in by-elections, especially where you've really rocked the Labour Party to the foundations on your own. I mean, pretty much on your own. I mean, I'm not, obviously those are people were there helping you, but you are evidence that it is possible that those breakaway left-wing parties can do it. And what would you say to the people who say it can't be done?
I'd say, well, what else can we do but try to make it happen? Labour is dead. It's dead as any kind of vehicle for socialism. It's not dead electorally. It can still get elected, but it won't, indeed can't, do anything that anyone who calls themselves a socialist would be interested in doing. So if you're a careerist and you just want a seat on a bench somewhere, either a hard bench in the local council or a soft one in the House of Commons, Labour is obviously still the best bet for you. But don't pretend that you're going to change anything significantly by being elected under that rubric. Look, I said on the day I was expelled that Mr. Blair would rue the day. I remember rolling my R's. He would rue the day that he had done this, and Labour came to rue it twice, in Bethnal Green and Bow in 2005 and in Bradford West in 2012. And they came quite close to ruining it in the Batley and Spen by-election last year, when I got, I think, 22% of the vote. And believe me, they had to pull out all the stops, legal and illegal, in order to keep me at bay there. So it can be done. But not everyone can do it, as has been proved. Many people, fine people, like Chris Williamson, for example, who's a good friend of mine and who I stood by from the first minute of his cavalry at the Calvary, I should say, at the beginning of the torture of and crucifixion of Chris Williamson. Chris got a very miserable vote when he stood for Parliament, despite being a person of upstanding character and outstanding quality. So not everybody can do it, and not everyone can do it every time, as I am also an example of. I mean, I stood in West Brom in 2019 to try and help defeat Tom Watson, a noble cause, you might agree. But I did very poorly there. So not everyone can do it, and not everyone can do it all the time.
Yeah, but that's very modest of you to say that. But I mean, I don't think I think that swing in Bradford was one of the largest in history.
That's right.
To
Yeah.
actually, I mean, the thing is, the Labour Party has all these sheets of who's their vote, you know, from years and years and years, and they know where they live, and they can just knock on the doors and get them. If you're a new party, you have to start that all up from scratch, and if it's a by-election, then you've hardly got any time to prepare that. So to manage to do that and in that short time is amazing, incredible. Shows how powerful your message was. Now you say that some can't do it. I mean, part of what I'd want to discuss with you is the kind of diversity of parties on the left at the moment. Tony Benn, I remember laughing about how many different parties of the left there are, and how there's only really the Labour Party. In a way, that was quite a powerful argument, that they're so splintered that we just have to pick, we have to go for the big one. What is the possibility of those splintered parties all getting together, and does it matter that they're not together? Do you think some of them, it's okay to have lots of left parties and just one will dominate? Well, how do you see that playing out?
Well, when Mr. Benn said that, it was a credible argument that that Labour, the big one, was the only way forward. I think we've dealt with the extent to which that's no longer the case, if indeed it ever was. As for the parties you adumbrate, I'm not familiar with some of them. I know next to nothing about them, but the Tusk is a decent sized and significant and respectable force. And I think the entry of Chris Williamson and his friends into the SLP might achieve something. It would obviously be better if everyone rallied under the same banner. But if they can't, then they should at least work together in, march separately, strike together, as the old saying said. So if organic unity is not possible, and it is very difficult, Crispin, I don't know if you've noticed how vociferous left-wing people are. I always think to myself, it's just as well they don't have guns, because if they did, there'd be a lot of dead bodies lying around, including mine. And that's, by the way, one of our barriers to electoral success. We're seen by people as, well, a bit crankish, a bit odd, a bit strange. And the people are not wrong about that. Whether it's the fact that we attract such people because we're there, or that we go looking for such people, I don't know. We have outstanding cadres in the Workers' Party of Britain, truly outstanding, just not enough of them. When you get bigger, you can sometimes get crankier, and that's all right. Cranks are lovable enough, but people don't generally want to vote for them. And then they, what Freud called the narcissism of the small difference. I want to nationalize 6 corporations and you want to nationalize 9. Therefore, I'm a class traitor who must be denounced as a reformist backslider. You can laugh if you like, but only 2 nights ago, that's exactly what some people on a video that was sent to me were saying. So there's an element of which that tends to suggest that the more left wing you are, the more likely you are to fall out with everyone else who's on the left wing. And then there's the definition of left wing. I no longer describe myself as left wing, though 99.9% of the people in the country who've ever heard of me would regard me as left wing. When I look around at what it seems to be left wing nowadays, I realize actually I'm not that. It would be a longer interview than you've probably got time for, but the preoccupation with crankish things by some on the left is a major barrier to unity on the left, and it's a major barrier to breakthrough in the electoral arena.
I mean, talking about that, this sort of no platforming and sort of, George Galloway, you can't talk to George Galloway because George Galloway said something that I don't agree with. So we're not going to ever talk on the same platform as George Galloway. This is a new concept, isn't it? It's not something you would have known in the 60s. I mean, there must have been, when you said about being in the Labour Party in the 60s, there must have been loads of different opinions on stuff, and people would just argue them out, and maybe they'd still disagree afterwards, but at least they discussed it. This is one of the worst elements of modern politics, isn't it? There's no platforming thing.
Yeah, it's a cancel culture thing that exists now across the political spectrum that didn't exist when I began my political life. That's true. If you think about it, I served and became friendly, actually, with both Harold Wilson and James Callaghan. I used to sit beside Dennis Healy in the House of Commons. So the idea that political differences actually across the floor, never mind with the person sitting alongside you, should make you either necessarily hate them or necessarily refuse to speak with them. Well, you see, people regard that kind of thing as crankish. I realize I've struck a seam with the word crankish. Ordinary people regard it as an absurdity that you will not stand on a platform with someone or even appear in an interview with someone even if that person's no longer there when you take the chair. This is a kind of madness, and it is a road to nowhere, which is why most people on the left outside the Labour Party end up going absolutely nowhere. It's never been the approach I've taken. It isn't now. I'm ready to sit with anyone on the left and discuss our differences and see where we can find common ground or agreement. I mean, I hear all the time about people I've never met or ever heard of saying that they wouldn't go on a platform with me, as if I'd even recognize them if I was sitting next to them on the bus. But here's the rub, Crispin. They may not speak to me, but I speak to, last week, 1,323,000 people, just last week. And it will be bigger next week. That's more important to me than whether John Doe or Mary Doe is prepared to talk to me about socialist politics. I'm the one with the reach. I'm the one with the audience. And that's infinitely more important.
I think that the new left party, we've got to sort this out, because I've got a feeling that the establishment think they've got this all set up nicely with whatever it is, 60% ahead in the polls, whatever it is. It's coasting, cruising. But I've got a feeling that if we get a alternative left party together, we can really screw up that plan and give them a black eye, a bit like with the Brexit. But the Brexit vote, I mean, they can't. They do think they've got the public where they want them, don't they? But they can't guarantee that, can they?
No, in the absence of an alternative, they do have the public where they want them with no real effective alternative to go for. But my take, and I'm out and about a lot, not just on the street, but on air and taking feedback on air. My take is that nobody loves any of the mainstream political parties. They may hate one or two more than they hate the third, but they don't love any of them. They don't love Starmer at all, but they may have to vote for him. That's the, if you like, the weary resignation that people feel. And so that's the paradigm we have to change. Look, the Workers' Party is not the finished article. We definitely don't have everything right. We are ready to work with others. We are even ready to join with others. We're not stuck on our name. We're not stuck on our program. We are flexible in terms of relations with other people. So we do need not just to think, but to talk about that. But that requires people to be ready to talk.
Chris, what I found interesting in his interview was that he said he's not tied to the Workers' Party. As he said at the end, he's flexible with it. He'd work with others or he'd go behind another party. That's quite a helpful. It's quite helpful to hear that from George Galloway because he's got quite a big audience, hasn't he?
Absolutely, no, he's got a very big reach indeed, and I mean, and thanks for interviewing George Crispin. I mean, I thought it was an excellent interview actually, and I thought George was incredibly measured, and it shows really, frankly, what a great statesman he is, and what a loss he is to politics. That we haven't got somebody of George's caliber, sitting in Parliament and speaking up for the issues which I think most, if not everybody, on this call feel strongly about. And we're talking the way in which he did about the importance of working together and collaboration, that willingness to do that, and the recognition that the Workers' Party is not the finished article. Even no political party necessarily got all the absolute right answers, but I think that approach that George set out there is absolutely the right approach, the sort of thing that I've been advocating. And I hope that, I mean, as we try to rebuild the Socialist Labour Party, that we will be able to work closely with the Workers' Party. We've worked closely with the Workers' Party as Resist already, and many of us went and campaigned for George in the Batley and Spen by-election. It was a fantastic campaign, Crispin, the Batley and Spen by-election. I mean, I did a short video people may have seen about my experiences there, and it was very clear. I made this point that where the soul was in the campaign between all the parties, people around George, those that came and campaigned, a real dedication, a real enthusiasm, huge enthusiasm for what the Workers' Party was saying, what George was saying on working class estates within the Kashmiri community. It was a really wonderful experience. And, the Labour Party fought an incredibly dirty campaign there and only just sort of got over the line in the end with a relatively small majority. And I was quite confident, actually, that I mean, I'm always a kind of dreamer, so, always hope for the best, but I genuinely thought George was in a real chance, actually, and I was a bit surprised, frankly, that he didn't actually end up being able to pull it off. And I think that would have been a great breakthrough. But I think that general point that George was making about the willingness to work together, to collaborate, and to move forward, march separately but strike together, is absolutely right. And look, our democracy has been stolen by the establishment in this country. As I was saying the other day on your show, Crispin, the Labour Party and the Tory Party, they're two sides of the same coin. And democracy should be about giving people a choice, and people have no choice now. I mean, people may see Labour as the lesser of two evils, which is, I think, what George was alluding to. But the fact is, and it's a well-known phrase, isn't it? But, lesser of two evils is still evil. And that's what's on offer. And I think you're right, Crispin. I think if we can get a head of steam behind us. You know, it is possible. Anything's possible. We have to dream. We have to believe that it's possible to, you know, to build an alternative. And I think we're duty bound to do that because there is no choice. And people, as I keep saying on your show and anywhere else where I get the opportunity, people are wasting their time putting all their effort into, you know, trying to achieve minor victories inside the Labour Party. They might get the odd minor victory, but it will amount to absolutely nothing in terms of any meaningful policy change if we ever get a Labour government. And that's why I think it's so important that we do put all our efforts into building this alternative.
Now, we did cover that quite well last week about the Labour Party not being a vehicle, but we're sort of moving on to whether we can find a new one. But I just want to show the results of this survey that we put out this last couple of days. So these are the people who took the survey. So it's 90% of people voted Labour in the last general election in 2019. Over 1,000 people took part in the survey. Now, if you look at what the answer to this question, the next one is, it's very interesting. If the next general election would you vote for a left-wing party if one is on the ballot paper? Actually, the whole question was, for example, Tusk, Breakthrough. So it named the parties, but I couldn't put it in this graph. But 66% of those 90%, of that 100%, you know, how can I put it? I'll redo it. 66% of people are saying they would vote for one of the smaller left-wing parties if there were a general election, which to me is a pretty encouraging. I mean, if they'd already do that now, if there was one on their ballot paper, I mean, that's the issue, that many constituencies won't have a left-wing party on their ballot paper as things stand because of the resources that are there. But if the resources were put behind it, then there's a great chance of a party doing quite well, isn't there?
I absolutely think that's right. And, you know, this is one of the points I think that Ken Loach was making about the urgency really for the trade union movement to step up to the plate. So, you know, we keep saying that, you know, the bankrolling a party that doesn't work in their interests, and that, you know, they really need to, it seems to me, you know, look at what is happening. What will the prospects be of a you know, Tory or Labour government, and think, well, hold on. I mean, we could use some of our resources that we're throwing at this, you know, useless entity of the Labour Party into building something different. But I think, you know, hopefully we can. I mean, I think, to be fair, I mean, look, the Workers' Party have made this point. The Tusk Trade Union Associates Coalition similarly agree that they're not necessarily the finished article. They're prepared to work with others. A new entity might, you know, join the sort of field of battle, and that might be the vehicle to take the movement forward electorally. But in the meantime, and I think one of the ways in which we, you know, potentially could have more of an impact, taking account of what you've just showed on your graph there, is that we need an electoral agreement whereby if we can't, you know, unite behind one particular either existing or new political vehicle that emerges, we absolutely have to have a political arrangement in place whereby we're not competing against each other in different constituencies. So there needs to be an electoral pact at the very minimum, I think, to give the best possible chance for some of the smaller parties to have a realistic chance of making a breakthrough. But you know, that's where I think we need to be focusing in terms of our, you know, what we do next.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to bring someone on who disagrees with everything we're saying, because on this show we don't just sort of have one viewpoint. Alan's story is part of Get PR Done. How are you doing? How are you doing, Alan?
Hi, greetings from Sheffield. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Now,
okay. Good morning, folks.
Would you like to respond to what you've heard from Chris and also from George?
Yeah. Well, I come from the cross-party, no-party campaign group called Get PR Done. And I want to make 6 points in the form of propositions. First, yes, it is possible to build a mass membership left-wing party, but it's a waste of effort to go very far along this route unless and until we change the voting system from our archaic first past the post voting system to proportional representation. Of course, PR is not a magic solving word, but it's a one place to start. Second, to quote from a 1986 article by Mr. Arthur Scargill, quote, I submit that proportional representation is a fundamental socialist concept. No socialist seriously committed to advocate democratic and accountable representation can advocate any other voting system. That's from Arthur Scargill. We could have similar quotes on other Keir Hardie, from Germany, Karl Liebknecht. We could quote Ian Hodson, Howard Beckett. Many progressive people support PR because PR means that all votes are equal. Now, the essential problem with first past the post is that it creates an electoral duopoly where votes are not equal. For example, a Tory vote is worth more than 20 times a Green vote. In the 2019 election, the Lib Dems got 11.7% of the vote, but only 1.7% of the seats. The iron laws of first past the post mean that only two parties, Labour and the Tories, can win elections. That's true in the UK for over 100 years. All other parties are competing against a stacked deck.
Can I come in? Can I just come in there? I know you might have a pre-speech. I just want to say, what about when Labour took over from the Liberals in the early part of last century? How was that achieved?
Well,
by your reckoning, they could never have done that.
What happened was across the world, socialists, in fact, embraced PR. Karl Liebknecht, the Germans, across the Finland, when it got created, had PR at its foundation. But in fact, in the UK, the Labour Party did not sign on for PR as socialist parties did across the world. They, in fact, wanted to keep with the old-fashioned first past the post voting system. And it's the same system that exists in Canada, exists in the United States, two parties, and there, in fact, no other party can get in there.
But how did Labour take over from the Liberals at the beginning of the last century without PR?
Well, I don't think we need to go back into 1920, 21. I just know that, in fact, the Liberals, in fact, declined and Labour came through. I'm not counting on, in fact, anything, because the way PR works is that, like Corbyn, for example, in 2017, on a quite radical program, got 40% of the vote. Amazing. What did we get from that? We got Theresa May. You see, the only way that new and emerging parties can win is if they have a geographic concentration like the SNP. The SNP does quite well under first past the post, but they're the only kind of party that's had any kind of a breakthrough in the past 100 years of any consequence because they're geographically concentrated. You see,
now look, I'm going. I think what we'll do, because I kind of get where you're going. We get what you're saying about PR, but I just want to say we can do a discussion on PR again, and I'll bring you on for that. But I don't want this debate to become about PR particularly.
Well,
but
okay.
thank you. No, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to Deepa Driver. Alan, we will discuss PR on another show. Are you there? Are you there, Deepa?
I am. Hi, Crispin. Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Deepa. So I just wanted to. What do you think? I mean, the idea that two-party system makes it pointless in a sense to have a new party and to try to build something from the grassroots. Is that just defeatist?
Firstly, partly because I'm feeling slightly ropey because we were out quite late last night with the gang after the human chain, but also because I actually would like to answer a slightly different version of the same question you're asking, Crispin. So forgive me if I'm banging on about something that you think isn't what I should talk about. But firstly, you know, I think the main problem with us on the left is what we characterize now as fascist has become, anything can be termed as fascist. So when you disagree with somebody, for example, either because they are wrong or because you have a genuine disagreement with them in terms of having a different point of view, whether it's on Brexit, whether it's on trans rights, whether it is on whether the SWP should be worked with, on all these different things, instead of saying I don't agree with them on X or Y or Z, we end up calling them fascist. And once we call them fascist, then it is okay to deplatform them, because we can still believe that we believe in freedom of speech and all that, and we respect it, but because we have the moral high ground, and this moral high ground is what we're most keen on the left in demonstrating lately, whether it is, you know, getting that fantastic letter into the local press or sending that super duper tweet, which is, you know, gotcha for Keir Starmer. That becomes more important than actually doing the things we're supposed to do. And we're focusing more on our differences than with the genuine left than we are with the differences with Starmer. So Starmer can be, for example, as bad on immigration as the Tories, or worse, as bad on imperialism, as bad on corruption, as bad on lobbying, as bad on racism. Yet many people who are still part of the Labour Party, and I say this with a heavy heart, because until not so long ago, I too believed that, you know, somehow or the other, you know, within the Labour Party, we would find a way, are still trying to make the Labour Party under Starmer work when it's a rigged system, which means that even if they work really hard and follow the rules in the way it's set by Starmer, he will find a way to exclude them at some point when they get into a sufficient position of power to do anything. And if we are going to win, firstly, we need the right leadership of this new left organization that we want. We need a run-up, so we need time before the next election. We need for the selection process to be reasonable, and then to have the finances to make it work, because one of the things that the Labour Party has, because of so many years of being entrenched in the system and being one of the two big parties, is not just a huge membership, but a huge amount of money coming in, which currently is funding racists like Asaf Kaplan, right? But to surveil us. But for those of you who don't know Asaf Kaplan, he's the guy who Keir Starmer brought in, who was a former soldier who was involved in targeting Palestinian people. So this is what we need to start thinking about. And one of the things is we know, you know, anybody here who's in the room, I suspect, is somebody who's at some point in time gone to a protest or a picket or a demo. I suspect there's nobody in this room who hasn't. And for those of you who've organized these, you know that it's hard to get even 10 people on a picket line. You know, sometimes, unless the situation is really bad, it's difficult to get people at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning to come out there and stand and lose a day's wage, etc. But we are the people who organize those pickets. We are the people who make it work and who have brought the labor movement forward. And if we are those people, I think we have a duty, because when we do these things, because we don't do them because you or I is trying to get into a position of power or become an MP. I mean, there might be some people here, like, you know, Chris, who've been an MP, but most of us are not aspiring to those things. But that's why people trust us, because we do the work on the ground. And it is shameful if we take that trust and hand it over and say to these people who trust us, who don't follow the politics, hey guys, vote for Keir Starmer, we'll go door knocking for Labour. When we know it's a racist, fascist, imperialist party now under Starmer.
Yeah,
So
I mean, can I just come in? This sort of deplatforming issue. I mean, if people are thinking deplatforming is okay, going to Labour meetings when the Labour Party is endorsing racist behaviour against Muslims and black members. I mean, surely that they should be deplatformed, the Labour Party, in some sort of way. We shouldn't. I mean, deplatforming is an endorsement. It's almost implying you're endorsing something. So, well, not endorsing something. What do you think? What do you think about that? I mean, Labour or Starmer's approach to authoritarianism, the way he's talked about Ukraine, the suspension of that guy who spoke about Ukraine. I mean, it just goes on and on. Now I've got to bring someone. Sorry, I've got to bring someone else.
Make one final comment, Crispin.
Yeah, you can have one final comment.
Okay, on this issue of deplatforming, I want to say that if we want to be a party for the masses, we have to talk to the left and the right. We can't just try and say things and talk things which are within our little circle with 500 people or 200 people or 10 people. And Crispin, you're absolutely right in bringing people like George Galloway on. I may not agree with him on some things, but that doesn't mean I don't recognize what a courageous man he is to take a stance against the Iraq war, and what a courageous man Chris is, for example, to take a stand on Palestine. So this is something that we need to do. And if we have to start now stopping to fight with each other and start fighting Labour and the Tories, who are both on the same side of big corporate corrupt capitalism.
Very good point. Thank you, Deepa. Right now, the next Richard. I believe that's the right Richard. Are you the Richard that I think you are?
Hello.
Well, I hope so. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Now, Richard, you're part of the Socialist Labour Network, and the Socialist Labour Network drew up a motion or a policy recently. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Crispin. So, I mean, the idea is basically consistent with the survey that you conducted. So we had an all-member meeting of the Socialist Labour Network, which is the merger of Labour Against the Witch Hunt and the Labour in Exile network. And obviously we're in favour of forming a new political party. Just to be clear, we don't want to add to the number of sects that exist, and that's not meant to be a rude word. I'm just trying to use shorthand for small socialist organisations that have their own specific projects. What we see the need for is a mass party of the organised labour movement. Obviously, we can't take over the Labour Party, and people have explained very clearly in a number of different contributions today why that is no longer possible, if it ever was. And I don't need to reiterate all the reasons for that. But what I would like to do is to talk about the situation that we're in right now, and how that suggests that the forces that could come together in a new mass party might be starting to evolve. Because it's been a very busy year, hasn't it? We've had a rash of strikes growing across the country. We've got trade unions that are in dispute with the government, and a Labour leader who won't even endorse people attending picket lines and who opposes the strikes. Admittedly, the RMT leadership is not as committed to the idea of a new party as it was under Bob Crow, but certainly they hold they don't support the Labour Party in any meaningful way. We've got Unite with considerable pressure to withdraw its funding, and we've got the CWU in dispute, although clearly their leadership want to maintain their lines open with the Labour Party. But what we've also got is 500,000 people who signed up to Enough is Enough, which was initiated by the CWU in early September. We've got 100,000 people who signed up to Don't Pay. We've got numerous people attending rallies organised by People's Assembly around the country. And what we see above all, and we've got Acorn as well, which is growing hand over fist around the country. And what we see also is that where people take the initiative to organise meetings in local areas, whether it's Leicester or Cardiff or Brighton, then people that have signed up to these national organisations will come along to these meetings, and the pressure there is for unity, to support the strikes, to protest against the price rises, and so on. So when we add to that the 200,000 and growing that have left the Labour Party over the last period, then the point that George Galloway made, the point that you made, Crispin, about us having to do something to make this left-wing party happen, the point that Chris made about there being an opportunity and a need to organise something on the left starts to come into, I think, a broader focus. So we don't believe that our job is to come up with a logo, come up with a brand, hand out some membership forms and say, come and join our ready-made party with our ready-made charismatic leader. But what we do believe is that all of those organisations, plus the existing socialist organisations, need to co-design a credible process in which we can discuss and talk about what that new party might look like. Now, Socialist Labour Network only has 500 members. So obviously we're not a party, but, you know we're not a party. And I think it's very important for us to start from the standpoint of trying to bring these different forces together. And the last point I want to make is the road to a new party is littered with the husks and the mummified remains of people that set out to build a party, but just declared it from the outset, the sects. And that's not the way forward, nor, incidentally, is trying to take over the Labour Party. But whenever we have had real mass parties that have actually been formed in real life, whether it was the Labour Party, whether it was the German Social Democrats, whether it was the unmentionable Russian Social Democrats, what they did was they went out and they brought together existing, growing organizations and tried to combine them into a single party. And they conducted careful and consistent discussions in order to achieve that. And that has had a record of success in the past. And surely that is the approach we should be adopting now.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on. Now, I've got a bit of a surprise for you, Chris. I've got your old comrade here, I've got Tosh on. Tosh, how you doing, Tosh?
I'm doing fine, Crispin. How are you?
Yeah, good. Now you were on the Democracy Roadshow with Chris, but now that was it within about Labour. But now you're both out of Labour. How do you feel about the chances of, or the possibility of, a mass membership party of the left?
I think it's entirely credible, the idea of a mass membership party of the left. And although we're ready to talk about unity on the left, and the wonderful introduction you give me, I'm afraid this is probably the first time in my life I'm going to disagree publicly with my good friend and comrade, Chris Williamson, when he referred to the Tories and Labour as being two sides of the same coin. That's not right. It's not right at all. They're two cheeks at the same arse. And the choice you get is which hole you want in middle, whether it's Starmer or Truss, to be honest. But look, it's a very cold time at the minute. It's a very cold time. We're going through a terrible winter in politics, not just the weather. And I think there are plenty of people on the left, and what we need to do is huddle together and keep warm. That's what we need to do now. I think the first move is Chris's Resist organisation merging with the Socialist Labour Party. I think that's a great thing. I was in touch with Arthur Scargill only a few days ago. We've got him coming to a RMT fundraiser. He's still active, he's there. If you look at the people who actually formed the Socialist Labour Party in the first place, people like Mick Ricks, who was General Secretary of ASLEF, there's Pat Sikorsky and Bob Crow from the RMT. You know, there's obviously Arthur and Frank Cave as well from the NUM. Great pedigrees we've got together. So what I think we need to concentrate on, although we can build a mass party, what we need to concentrate on is all the left working together. I say if we get a Labour Party, this Labour Party elected at the next election, which could be any time within the next 2 years, I think the Starmer Labour government would set the Labour movement back a decade at least. A decade at least. It would kill, it would destroy dreams, and there would be people thinking they're voting for Labour to vote for better for working people, and that's not where they would get. So I think we have to have an organised left, which will eventually lead into a party. Now, Chris has kindly sent me the membership form for Socialist Labour Party. Unfortunately, I ain't got a printer working at the minute, but I think that's the way I will be going very shortly. And I don't care what party people are in on the left. We've got to work together. We've got to huddle together. The People's Assembly, I work with them. I've done for years, certainly around Doncaster. And that's the way forward. Let's not find the differences. Let's find what we've got in common. Along with Chris, I campaigned in Erdington for Dave Nellis. I campaigned with Chris, alongside Chris, for George Galloway in Batley and Spen. I don't care who the socialist candidate is. I will go out and happily canvass and support them. That's what I'll do. And I just see coming up there, my old comrade John Dunn's joined the Socialist Labour Party as well. So maybe something's happening, comrades. Maybe something's happening, and it's not so cold out there now.
Well, great, thank you. What I'm getting from this discussion is the need to join up forces. I mean, what was said by Richard earlier was that the Labour Party was a coming together with the unions, different smaller parties, and even the Fabians. I mean, all of those combined created the Labour Party. So that was an example of that. But this is another result in the survey, which is, would you like a new party to emerge from the Enough is Enough campaign, which I've heard has now got over 700,000 subscribers. And 75% of people would like a new party to emerge from that, which is quite an interesting way forward. I mean, that's got numbers definitely behind it. If it had other parties associated with it and groups, that could be really big from the start in numbers. I'm going to bring on June Tobin. How are you doing, June?
Morning, Crispin. I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, what did you think about what's been said, and also what do you think about that enough is enough? This sort of 75% think that it would be great if Enough is Enough could set up a political party. So there's definitely a desire for that to move to something else, isn't there?
There definitely is. I mean, I attended Enough is Enough rally in Luton. There was probably 300 people there, but it was electric. And people were standing up and chanting and clapping because they really are sick to the back teeth of our corrupt politics and the people always paying the brunt of it. You just touched on it there. We need to look at history because history repeats itself. And if we don't learn from it, we're making the same mistakes. And I think Tony Benn said the same thing, didn't he? That we have to keep fighting the fight time and time again. We need to go back to the beginnings of how the Labour Party was formed. It was by bringing all of these socialist and unions and groups together under one banner, all agreeing and putting themselves forward. And that's how the Labour Party was formed. And we need to do that again. And if we're not ready by the next election, then so be it. But we need a new party because our politics is corrupt. It's corrupt and it's morally bankrupt, and we're never going to change it. So we definitely need something, because I'm on the front line here running a food bank and a community fridge, and our communities are really suffering.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of luxury of discussing it. I mean, we're doing that now. We are discussing it, but there needs to be some action from people who can make this happen.
I agree with everything Ian Hodson said and Richard from the SLA, and I agree with Chris Williamson, but we need someone to lead it, and I don't know who. We need to just bash their heads together and say, for goodness sakes, there's enough of us out here that we could literally be one great big movement.
Can I add something to what June has just said, Crispin? It's Richard here.
Oh, hi, Richard. I didn't know you were unmuted. Let me.
You unmuted me, which was very kind of you. I thought you were encouraging.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let you come in. I don't know how you do.
I just so agree with what you were saying, and it just occurred to me that if we want to create some structure, shouldn't we organise a great conference on this question, or congress, in which all of the different forces could come along and make it really transparent? Because I have to say, I think the CWU leaders who called Enough is Enough do not want a new party. But my God, when you were talking about Luton, I was at the launch meeting of Enough is Enough in South London, in Clapham Junction. There was over 1,000 people there. And the more radical the speeches became, the more people were cheering. And I thought the roof was going to fall in. There is no doubt in my mind that really large numbers of those people would rally to the idea of jointly participating in the creation of a new party, not setting it up and just bringing them along, but actually taking part in creating it. And like you said about the Labour Party, it was the Social Democratic Federation, it was the Independent Labour Party, it was the various trade unions, it was the networks that sold the old Clarion newspaper around the northwest of England. It was real organisations of the Labour movement that came together in a new party. And I really do think that we're in a situation where we could we could do that. And I would appeal to all the organisations around and people that aren't, at the moment in an organisation to come together and try to make that happen.
Right. Well, thank you. I'm going to mute you this time. I'll keep you muted. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, June. Good to see you. Now I'm going to bring on Raj Gill from Ealing. Raj made a point as well about what's lacking in the Labour Party as well is we have to address the diversity that the Labour Party is clearly not a party for all groups, is it?
Hello, Chris.
Yeah, you're on now.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much for calling me. I think listening to the discussion here, to bake a perfect cake, we got all the ingredient, and I think the Labour has become a bit of a stale bread at the moment. We need to look back, everything other comrades have said about how the Labour Party was formed with the trade councils and the cooperative movement, with community organizations. So there is a current which always existed for socialism or socialist policy and fairness. That hasn't gone away. The fact that Jeremy Corbyn is no longer leading the Labour Party, the trade union movement and the comradeship is there. We can change things. I agree that we need to find a way of igniting and getting people together. And at the moment, there are different diverse groups, including obviously comrade from Black and Asian community and other BAME members, disabled people and others. We need to get everybody together. And I think we may need to take these in steps. So the Labour Representation Committee that formed the Labour Party didn't do it all in one go. And I think similarly, we need to, if the one party, everybody comes together and the one party emerges, then we need bottom up in terms of this party participating with local elections and local struggles and strikes, and then move it up. The party is not going to emerge from top down. I think that's a mistake. There are definitely out there people willing, looking at what is out there, what is the alternative, and we need all the opinion. We need all the left opinion. We all need all the socialists. Unfortunately, even in the trade union, you have certain amount of bureaucracy that prevents us going forward. And I think some union leaders, Ian and other Community Communication Workers Union, others, RMT and other small unions are playing a progressive role. And also the general secretary is of the Unite is a good comrade, and she's doing a fantastic work. But we can do a lot of things. We can build a movement and the party will emerge. And I think it's no use trying to water everything down. We need our radicalism. We need to reignite the people, people who are prepared to fight for socialism, socialist principle. We don't need, people will see us for what we are. We stand by our principle. That doesn't mean we cannot include other people into that stream. we need to include all communities into the
Yeah.
streams and win. And we can do it, Crispin. I'm totally convinced it's out there. A lot of people got ideas. We can convince the younger generation. I mean, I'm old now, I'm getting tired. I think most of the comrades in this meeting are old, probably my age. But we need to convince the young, and I'm pretty sure the young people will rally to us like they did under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership.
Yeah. Can I? I've just got to do the move. Thank you for coming on, Raj. Now, what you reminded me of when you came on was how, you know, the Jeremy Corbyn campaign to be leader in 2015 came from nothing, and everyone in their own communities built up those meetings, those massive meetings, and the support network around him. They could do that in a couple of months. It didn't take all that long to get that going. Once we had a spark, Jeremy Corbyn standing for leader, everyone was going for it. It's just we need the first step, don't we? And when Raj, you did a massive meeting in Ealing, I think Jeremy, it was on the national news because it's so big. And it just reminded me of that. And Chris, obviously you were in Derby and setting up a meeting there. So it is possible to get things going pretty quickly once there's a spark, isn't it?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, let's remember, Jeremy, you could get odds of 200 to 1, I think he was, when he first entered the race. He didn't even have enough nominations at that point in time to even get on the ballot paper. And, you know, we saw what happened. It was astonishing, wasn't it? I mean, the Labour Party, I mean, you know, I thought all my Christmases had come together. We got a left-wing leader, we got a mass membership. It was amazing. And then, as we all know, we got the biggest increase in vote share for the Labour Party since 1945. So yeah, I mean, things can happen quickly. And if you're not just in this country, I mean, let's take the example not just of Jeremy and what happened there, but you know, across the water in terms of in Europe, in Greece and in Spain, and the emergence of Podemos and Syriza. I know things have sort of gone a little bit sour there, but you know, they were able to build a big movement, and it happened quite quickly. So these things can sort of, you know, get a life of their own if we can get that spark right. And it seems to me there is a lot of goodwill, a lot of willingness to collaborate from a lot of people, and that's got to be the way forward. I mean, Deepa, I think, put a finger absolutely on it when she talked about, you know, trying to build that big alliance and build links with and alliances with, you know, people who don't necessarily share our politics. We've got to kind of break out of those silos, it seems to me. And I know that people are talking in those terms over in the United States as well about, you know, building an alliance between people on the left and people who, you know, who've you know, supported Donald Trump. I mean, and Jeremy touched on this, didn't he, when people asked him about UKIP? Well, what about these UKIP voters, and why did they, you know, what are you going to do about them? And he said, well, you know, a lot of people voted UKIP out of desperation, and he's absolutely right. And just take my own local example. We actually in Derby North in 2017 specifically, explicitly targeted UKIP voters, and we saw UKIP vote in Derby North and across the country absolutely collapse from where it was. And many of those people who, I think some people perhaps on the left might have just dismissed, oh, you're a bunch of racists and would sort of demonize them, actually came to Labour and supported it. Some of them actually voting, you know, for the first time. But I think those are the sorts of things that we need to draw strength from, draw inspiration from. And, you know, Alan's point about PR is a point well made, but we're going to, in order to get PR, we're going to have to fight elections on the existing system. And that means, it seems to me, building a party and trying to build that mass support in order to, you know, get sufficient people into Parliament to make those changes, because it's not in the interests of Labour or the Tories, for that matter, to actually change the status quo, because they benefit from the first past the post system. So we are where we are in that regard. So I think, and that's actually a very clear policy. I mean, he mentioned Arthur Scargill, but it's a very strong policy of the Socialist Labour Party. So we do need to embrace that, but we've got to be realistic enough to recognise we're not going to get PR with a present shower in the Labour Party and in the Tory Party. So the way forward, it seems to me, is we've got to work with the existing system, and that means absolutely, you know, collaboration. I mean, we always talk about unity as strength, don't we, on the left? For Christ's sake, let's show a bit of unity. let's demonstrate solidarity and move forward together.